I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up this hour, NASDAQ roars back. A day after falling more than 10% from a record, it mounts a rebound. Tesla has the biggest gain in over a year. GameStop defies gravity, climbing as much as 27%. We've got you covered on a huge day for the markets. Plus, speaking of Tesla, hackers attack Tesla security cameras and video footage of U.S. prisons. This after Chinese hackers go after Microsoft's business email software in a hack bigger than solar winds. We'll talk to a cybersecurity expert about the damage and what needs to happen next. And the race to hit the pavement. Amazon-backed EV maker Rivian says it'll roll out a pickup, an SUV, and a van all this year. A daunting production pledge and, quite literally, the need for speed. All those stories in a moment, but first, hope springs eternal for investors. The NASDAQ seeing a massive rally. Our Ed Ludlow has the very latest. Ed, a big rebound today for those who were terrified this was going to be a long-term correction.
Yeah, how quickly things change. Full risk on mode, technology stocks really at the heart of that. The NASDAQ 100, which is that index, very tech heavy that we talk about a lot, up more than 4.4%. Its best day since November 4th, a special day because that's my birthday, of course. The NYSE Fang Plus Index up 6.8%, and the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index up 6%. Both of those indices having their best day since April. So really a surge and a rebound in technology stocks on Tuesday. In terms of some of the specific movers on Tuesday, it's the names that have really been under pressure. The likes of Tesla, which had its best day in more than a year. You can see they're up almost 20%. Lots of catalysts behind Tesla. Wall Street analysts raising price targets, also riding the wave of cryptocurrency after that recent investment. But some breaking news after the bell that hackers have actually managed to get hold of live surveillance footage from inside Tesla's Shanghai factory. They were able to do that through a third party, which was monitoring, storing the live feeds. A Bloomberg scoop coming after the bell. There doesn't seem to be any aftermarket reaction in terms of the share price, but that's definitely one to watch going forward. And then, of course, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, those stocks that have been under pressure as yields have been rising. If we put the NASDAQ 100 side by side with the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, though, we raise the question of whether this is really a surprise. If you look at the action of recent days and weeks, the NASDAQ 100 was off 11% from its February 12th record. The Philadelphia Semiconductor Index off 15% from its February 16th record. When we see pullbacks, we then see buying. That's been a common theme in markets of recent moves. Come with me into my Bloomberg and also look at this chart, because basically we see that even though we had this rebound today, tech stocks are still sensitive to bond yields. In fact, they're most sensitive to bond yields since 2016. A lot of the concern is about the stretch valuations that came as a result of that outsized earnings growth that we got in the most recent quarter. And finally, I want to touch on Cathie Wood. Wow, how things can change in such a short space of time. 24 hours ago on the show, on the back of her and ARK's worst run in a long time. Today, ARK Innovation ETF up 10%, its best one-day gain on record. Emily.
Ed, a wild day and also a big comeback in the crypto markets as well. Bitcoin now above $54,000. What's driving that, or is it just happening in parallel with broader market trends?
Yeah, Bitcoin up near records, near $54,000. Support largely coming from the risk-on sentiment in the market. But there was some notes out there as well. You know, data's doing the rounds online. You know, it's a very popular asset class with Twitter users and Reddit users alike about how a large number of insurers actually are getting into Bitcoin, you know, giving it some institutional backing. Also, technical analysis, a report out from Evercore ISI saying that they see Bitcoin headed towards $75,000 based on technical analysis. If we look to the cryptocurrency alongside Ether over the last 12 months, Ether, of course, the second biggest cryptocurrency, we've been so focused in recent weeks about being near those record levels. But if you go back even just to November, look at the run up in both of those cryptocurrencies. You know, this is a longer term story. There's been such a dramatic increase in the price of both over recent months that focusing day to day on 45,000, 54,000, there are such huge swings in the price. It's really about looking at those longer term drivers for lots of the commentators in the market.
All right, Ed, thanks so much for that wrap. Much to continue to follow. I also want to hit on GameStop today, another winning streak there. Shares of the video game chain rising 96% over the last 5 days. Activist investor Ryan Cohen, the founder of Chewy, is continuing to shake up operations. The company says he will lead a committee focused on digital transformation. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld. And Katie, certainly a lot of investor optimism, but also a lot of retail interest. Would you see a move like that if it was just some normal activist investor coming in and trying to shake things up?
I really don't think you would. I mean, GameStop, it's had such a week, up 80% already, and taking markets by surprise. And, you know, we did have fundamental news behind this move, at least in Ryan Cohen being tapped to lead the company's e-commerce revival. But as analysts have pointed out, that was expected, and it probably doesn't explain why we've had such a big rally this week. And it's probably premature, even if you do expect GameStop to successfully execute that shift. Craig Burke from Personal Capital told Bloomberg today that transformations take time. Obviously, some fail. So it's not a sure bet that GameStop will successfully pull this off. But given the enthusiasm that we've seen behind the stock regardless of that fact, it probably points to this is really retail driving this move.
So let's talk about that. I spoke to Kathy Wood of ARK Invest yesterday, asked her about the retail investor frenzy, this shift in power we're seeing from institutions to individual investors. Take a listen to what she had to say.
The retail investor has seen the future really before institutional investors, because post tech and telecom crash and post 08-09 meltdown, institutions have been forced to track their benchmarks more closely, or they've chosen to. We think that's longer term a losing proposition. It's very backward looking. So we have found some of our strongest holders to be retail investors, because they really are keeping their eye on the prize. They know the world is changing. They're part of making the change.
She's talking about retail investors holding in ARK's ETFs, Katie. That comment got a lot of engagement on social media, probably from some of the folks who are investing in retail investing at this very moment. Talk to us about what the continued push into GameStop actually means, given that they don't seem to be losing their momentum.
Yeah, and I mean, Kathy's right in that the retail investor has been a big fan of her funds, and they've really held in there. ARK has admittedly seen outflows in the past couple of weeks as some of that performance starts to bite, but really, there's really sticky inflows in there because she is so popular among this Reddit crowd. And in terms of what GameStop means for the market, and it just shows that retail traders, they're here to stay. I mean, after the mania that we saw at the end of January, a little bit into February, a lot of people in the market were happy to write that off as well, that was weird, but at least it was a one-off. But as we can see from this week and some of the action in some of the penny stocks, it's not just GameStop, I'll point it out. It really shows that the retail trader is still hanging in there. They're holding through the dips. And they were expected to be shaken out by the first time of trouble, but clearly that hasn't happened.
Well, and Kathy Wood also said in that interview she's still buying the Tesla dip, and we saw a comeback there. I mean, what's your sense of whether we are seeing the beginning of a longer-term correction, or whether the last few days and weeks are just a blip in a tech market that's going to continue to go up?
Well, with everything else, it depends on your timeline. You know, if you look 6 months into the future, the economy's open again, inflation maybe is picking up. Some of those stay-at-home favorites that really had a great day today, I'm thinking about Peloton, DocuSign, it makes sense that we could see, some of the amazing gains that they've seen start to come out of those stocks. But if you think about Apple and Amazon, those type of names, they're going to continue to make money in any type of economic cycle, probably. But in terms of the short term and the tech rebound that we're seeing, the tech sell-off got really overstretched. As we know, the NASDAQ 100 fell into a correction yesterday. Looking at it relative to the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100 was the most oversold in 3 decades. So again, it depends on your time frames. If you're looking longer term, maybe fade this tech move. But if you're looking in the short term, things are pretty oversold at this point.
All right, Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld there. So much to continue to follow. Thanks so much, Katie. Meantime, some quick breaking news. Roblox has priced shares for its direct listing, which is happening tomorrow. Roblox, of course, the gaming company that gives a lot of power to gaming creators, pricing its shares at $45 a piece. We are going to be covering Roblox's direct listing tomorrow. You can stay tuned for our interview with Roblox CEO David Baszucki at 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Coming up on Bloomberg Tech, the Bitcoin rally showing no signs of stopping. We're going to talk to the CEO of Cipher Mining, a Bitcoin mining company going public via SPAC. We'll talk about his outlook on how high the digital currency can go. That is next. This is Bloomberg.
We did talk about the crypto decision, the decision to shift some cash into crypto. Certainly, we were fully supportive of that. Any company on the right side of change should do diversify in that way.
ARK Invest CEO Cathie Wood there speaking with us about supporting Elon Musk's decision to pour $1.5 billion of cash into Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin rallied to a 2-week high as a risk-on sentiment returned, following more sell-offs in more speculative corners of the financial market. A digital asset that continues to see more endorsements from institutions. And riding that wave of Bitcoin demand is Cipher Mining, a newly formed Bitcoin mining firm which is going public via SPAC with GoodWorks acquisition. The deal will give the company a value of $2 billion. Cipher Mining CEO Tyler Page joins us now. So Tyler, why a SPAC and why now?
Hey, Emily, thanks for having me today. Well, as we can see with the news across the space today, there is increasing adoption of the Bitcoin network. And that's from everyone that are actually large institutional investors to institutional service providers. There's a lot of news going on in the space and rapidly increasing adoption. And with that, we think the infrastructure that underpins the network also needs to become more robust and more institutionalized. And that's what we're doing. We are a large scale Bitcoin miner, and we're coming public via SPAC because it allows us to move quickly and take advantage of the marketplace.
Now, your parent company, Bitfury, since its inception in 2011, you've mined 600,000 Bitcoin. How many more are you planning? And talk to us about the scale of demand.
Absolutely. So we have a plan for Cipher specifically to build out our facilities to be mining over 21,000 Bitcoin per annum in 2025. And we begin mining this year, and we scale up year over year as we go. One of the great advantages we have is partnering with Bitfury, our parent. There's really no one with more experience in the space, having set up over seven data centers around the globe, had them operating and mining over 600,000 Bitcoin. It speaks to their experience at deployment, operating and maintaining Bitcoin mining centers. And so we are doing it at a very large scale, and we have unique advantages by partnering with them both on the services and the equipment side.
Now, part of why people think Bitcoin is valuable is because of the fixed number of coins that could be mined, 21 million of them. I know people have said, oh, that is a long way off, but it could come sooner than we think if companies like you keep moving quickly. What happens when we run out of the 21 million, or could that number rise?
Well, the number's not going to rise. It's fixed in the software, and we actually do have some time to get to the last one. We've got over 100 years, but most of them will be mined in the next 20 years. Keep in mind, we are not going to speed up that schedule. But as you see increasing adoption by institutional users, we would anticipate that is going to drive the price higher. We think that transaction fees are also a piece of revenue, obviously, that we will be collecting as being part of the vital infrastructure that helps it grow. I mean, keep in mind, today the estimates are that there are about 100 million users of the Bitcoin network. We think that could easily grow to billions of users in the coming years, and that's going to drive the price and usage of the network up. And you need, you want the network to be robust to support that continued growth. And that's really what we can bring.
So let's talk about the price. Mike Novogratz thinks it'll get to 50,000 beyond. Talking about another CEO I was speaking with thinks it's going to go to infinity, Mars, and beyond. But give me a number.
I saw that. That was great. I think it's really hard to predict the short-term path of prices, but I do believe over time, and I think everyone that is involved in Cypher and Bitfury believes over time the price is going to go up. It can be volatile in the short term, but if you see continued network adoption, you'll see price appreciation over the long term. The great thing about our business model is we are the classic picks and shovels business. The price of Bitcoin can drop quite a bit, and we can still have a very profitable company. We really do provide the infrastructure that makes it work, and we have the lowest cost of power, or we are at the low end of the global cost curve, and that enables us to be very profitable and withstand volatility in the price.
I misspoke on Novogratz. He thinks it'll get to 100,000 before the end of the year, then 500,000 beyond that. Your focus is Bitcoin. What's your take on all these other coins, Dogecoin and some of these altcoins, which Novogratz told me he thinks Doge is a joke?
I think Mike's a very sharp guy. Our focus is on Bitcoin mining. That's the only coin that we have in our current plans to support from a mining perspective. There are many interesting things going on in the crypto space, and often very fun to read about or invest in at small scale personally. But our focus from a business perspective is Bitcoin. A uniquely natively digital store of value and value transmission network that's open source is just extremely robust and has the potential to disrupt a lot in financial services. So we are big bulls in the long term. I won't give a specific price target, but up.
What are the biggest risks to your business, though? I mean, obviously, there are many things that are unproven. There's regulation to come. What do you think the biggest headwinds are?
Well, I think they're related to the ecosystem overall. I mean, I've heard folks speculate about the Bitcoin price that, one thing we know for sure is that the terminal value of Bitcoin is not where it is today because there's still risks and questions about adoption. And like any network adoption story, those risks are reflected in the price day to day, and they're discounting a future where perhaps there's billions of users or perhaps there's not. I think we have exposure to those same kinds of risks. We do have a lot of resilience against the drop of price in Bitcoin, but if it goes away, that is a major risk to our business.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep following Cypher Mining CEO Tyler Page. Thanks so much for stopping by. Coming up, BioNTech could have capacity to make 3 billion doses of the COVID vaccine next year. We'll hear from BioNTech's CEO next. This is Bloomberg. BioNTech sees the potential to supply 3 billion COVID shots in 2022. Earlier, Bloomberg's Matt Miller spoke with the CEO of BioNTech about the company's ability to boost production. Take a listen.
In principle, this could be possible. So we are evaluating that. But it also depends on the order book. Yeah. So the question is now with a number of additional vaccine companies coming into the market. Our key question is how much doses are required, yeah, and where is the need to deliver, and this is something that we are evaluating at the moment.
What about the possibility of forging new partnerships? I mean, I know you've already worked with a bunch of other smart companies. Do you think, are you in talks with others to produce the vaccine in higher quantities and in more places?
Yeah, we are. We have still some undisclosed negotiations ongoing, but we have managed to establish a network with 13 partners. Yeah, partners producing for us raw materials like lipids. Yeah, and partners who are helping us in producing product and partners in helping us also for fill and finish, like Sanofi, Baxter, or Novartis. So this is a network, a production network, and of course this production network includes the BioNTech production sites, including the Marburg site, which will come in now in April, and as well as the production sites of Pfizer, and in Europe it's Tours. Yeah.
Are you confident that you're going to be able to produce enough vaccines this year and next year with all of your partners to vaccinate everyone in the world? Does that look like an attainable goal to you, at least in terms of quantity, by, say, the end of 2022?
That must be the goal of all vaccine suppliers. So we need to ensure that everyone who needs a vaccine receives and wants a vaccine receives a vaccine. Yeah, and I'm pretty confident that we will be able to provide vaccines for in Europe and in the United States, and ensure that everyone who requires a vaccine gets a vaccine until end of summer. Of course, this assumption is based on that we are not running into multiple production problems, and I'm also confident that within 2022 we can have sufficient vaccine doses to ensure vaccination worldwide.
What are your plans for production next year? You want to produce 2 billion doses by the end of 2021. What about 2022?
Yeah, in principle, we could further increase our manufacturing capacity. So I don't see a limitation why we should not be able to produce even 3 billion doses in 2022. And it really depends on the demand. It depends on factors, for example, whether additional boost vaccinations are required. It will depend on potential changes in the strains. Yeah. And therefore we are prepared to further increase our manufacturing capacity, but we need to get additional information which might come in the next 6 months.
Ur Sahin there, CEO of BioNTech, will be covering the big Microsoft hack after this break. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. A group of hackers say they breached a massive trove of security camera data collected by the Silicon Valley startup Verkata, gaining access to live feeds of 150,000 surveillance cameras inside hospitals, companies, police departments, prisons, and schools around the world, even inside, as I mentioned, Tesla. For the latest, let's bring in Bloomberg Tech's Will Turton, who broke this story. William, what happened?
So hackers breached this company in the worst way imaginable. They were able to access the administrator credentials that were publicly available on the internet and gain access to the camera feeds and archived video of all of the company's customers, which include Tesla, Cloudflare, schools, hospitals, jails, as you just mentioned.
So who are these hackers and why did they do this?
So it's a hacking collective that's international. We spoke to one of those hackers on the record who kind of has an anti-capitalist, anti-surveillance worldview, and who also says, it's just too much fun not to do these sorts of hacks. They did this hack in order to raise awareness on the kind of ubiquity of surveillance and how badly that's secured.
So are they planning to do anything with this footage? Are they planning to use this to inflict some kind of greater damage?
No, I don't think so. I think, these people are trying to blow the whistle on what they see as, kind of surveillance capitalism and also, what they see as kind of a thirst for profit before actually securing the kind of customers and the people who would come in front of their security cameras. They're not the sorts of hackers that are looking to, destroy data or hold the company for ransom or anything like that.
So what is Verkata saying?
Verkata is not saying much. They're saying essentially that they're investigating the incident. That's about it. And you kind of start to wonder when you're looking at the scale and how easy it was for hackers to get inside, what the fallout's going to be, right? This company raised tens of millions of dollars and was valued at almost $2 billion. What are their customers going to say? What is the U.S. government going to say? Is there going to be an investigation? That's kind of the next sort of questions, I would assume.
So, obviously, Tesla is the most high-profile name here. But when you think about hospitals and jails and, other organizations across the country that, may not be as well fortified, what are the possible consequences of this kind of vulnerability?
Yeah, and you kind of hit on one of the worst parts of it, right? It's not because the hospitals or the jails had bad security. It's that the company that sold them the cameras had a feature in which someone could get inside and look at a live view of all their customers, as well as the clips that they had archived. There's with hospitals, right, there's obviously HIPAA considerations and certain privacy laws here. We're going to have to see what actually happens with that. But, the just sheer amount of surveillance video that was exposed by this hack is staggering.
All right, William Turton, we will continue to follow the fallout from that story. Great scoop. You can read more at Bloomberg.com. Meantime, turning to another global hack attack revealed last week, which puts the U.S. in a very vulnerable position. China's global attack on Microsoft's popular email software has already claimed 60,000 victims. This just 3 months after an equally sprawling Russian attack, which impacted as many as 18,000 customers of the Texas-based software maker SolarWinds, including key government agencies. Hackers are racing to infect as many victims as possible in this latest Microsoft breach before companies can secure their computer systems. For more, I want to bring in Kirsten Todd of the Cyber Readiness Groups, who served in the Obama administration. So, Kirsten, tell us more about this latest Microsoft hack, aside from the fact that it is bigger than SolarWinds.
Well, thanks very much, Emily. Thanks for having me on. So, preliminarily, what we know and what we speculate is that the Chinese hacker group, it's a state-sponsored hacker group known as Hafnium, exposed the vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange, and in doing so has breached, early reports are saying, over 30,000 small and medium-sized businesses, as well as state and local governments in the United States. But different from SolarWinds, we're also seeing an impact right now of over 250,000 businesses worldwide.
So talk to us about, is it Microsoft at fault here in terms of not being ready for this? Where do you think the problem lies?
Well, to the story that William just broke, what we're seeing is real vulnerabilities in software across all technology. This was the issue with SolarWinds. It's the story that William just broke with surveillance cameras. And we're understanding more specifically what happened with Microsoft Exchange. But the important piece here is that you're starting to see the US government look at this issue. And last week, the Biden administration announced that they're going to be looking at software security standards, which means that all of the software that goes into technology, whether it's critical infrastructure or not, will have a certain level of security standards. Because the challenge that we have right now is that security is not prioritized over revenue or profit. And it seems that it's an opportunity for government to work with industry to change that.
But even for a company like Microsoft, which certainly projects that it cares very deeply about cyber vulnerabilities.
Well, and it absolutely does. I think Microsoft is the leader in security. They've shown how they prioritize it. They testified in front of Congress the last 2 weeks and made some very important statements about the work that they've been doing. the challenge is across the board, software has vulnerabilities. And if we leave it to industry, the challenge is that right now, industry, private sector, this is the only space in cyber where we ask these companies to defend themselves. And government really has to play a role in helping these companies. The landscape is huge, and industry cannot protect itself by itself. And what this is calling us to do is to bring together government and industry pre-event to be much more forward-leaning in sharing of information, actionable intelligence, nation-state activity, so that government and industry can work to prevent these types of attacks. We can't ask any company to do it by themselves.
Meantime, what do you think these Chinese hackers are going for here? What kind of damage, if the folks who breached Verkata are just trying to make a point? I assume that these Chinese hackers might actually want to do something with the information they've now obtained.
Right. Well, so the Verkata breach right now seems like it's probably an act of hacktivism. So to William's point, just essentially making a point. But what we know, and Emily, you and I have talked about this a lot, particularly over the last 6-7 months, China's aggregating data. They're collecting massive amounts of data, vaccine research, personally identifiable information, healthcare data. And the big question is, to what end? We know that they are looking to collect it for various reasons, but we actually don't know what those reasons are, which is why we have to be hyper vigilant and have industry and government truly work together to make our infrastructure stronger. And when I say infrastructure, it's not just critical. We've got to be securing our software across the board.
So first SolarWinds from Russia, then this Microsoft hack from China. Is the rest of the world beating the United States in cyberspace?
Well, I think we would be naive to think this isn't happening to other countries. But when it comes to prevention and when it comes to response, this is not a competition among our allies or like-minded economic powers. This is a call to action for the United States to work with its international partners to come together and understand what are these norms for the standards and regulations to be more secure. As cybersecurity doesn't recognize geographic boundaries, so our policies for doing so should be much more collaborative. And that's certainly something the Biden administration has prioritized. You know, a good news story in all of this is you have the National Security Advisor tweeting about cybersecurity last week, talking about the urgency. So I think, you know, these events really just urge all of us in the United States and on the world stage to truly come together, because as we've seen before, whatever happens to one partner will likely happen to another. And we're not looking for that to happen. We're actually looking to prevent this from happening again.
All right, Kirsten Todd of the Cyber Readiness Institute, thanks for explaining and breaking that all down for us. Appreciate it. Coming up, the global chip shortage is still hitting industries hard, with countries ramping up production plans to tackle it. We'll get perspective from John Chambers, founder of JC2 Ventures, and of course, the CEO, former CEO of Cisco. You don't want to miss that. This is Bloomberg.
We're going to defend the firm vigorously because we actually disagree with the fundamental premise. And I think the facts will come out, and it'll bear out that Robinhood is a customer-focused company that is operating with the highest standards of integrity, and will continue to do so.
Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev there. He is my special guest on the latest edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0, airing Wednesday, fresh off the GameStop frenzy in January and subsequent congressional hearings. He spoke to me about the company's mission, its response to the criticism, his background, where he comes from, and more. You can catch that episode tomorrow, Wednesday, 1 p.m., 5:30 p.m., 9:30 p.m., all Eastern time, right here on Bloomberg Television. You don't want to miss it. Meantime, the EU is pledging to manufacture 20% of the world's chips by 2030, an ambitious goal in an effort to reduce the reliance on foreign companies. This as supply chain bottlenecks and increased demand have caused a shortage of chips around the world. Joining me now to discuss, John Chambers, founder and CEO of JC2 Ventures and, of course, the former CEO of Cisco. John, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with this chip shortage because obviously you spent so many years at Cisco building chips into networks that are now technology around the world that we all need, especially as we work from home. How big a deal do you think this chip shortage is, and how damaging could it be?
Well, I think it is a big deal, and I think there would be a fair amount of damage with it. What I'm seeing and talking to both the suppliers but also customers is it's a cycle that's going to go into next calendar year. So it's a year long in terms of the challenges. And remember, all it takes is one chip to prevent you from manufacturing an automobile or shipping a computer. It also speaks to our supply chain not working effectively in this new market. We still use the same supply chain capabilities of 10 and 20 years ago. I think you're going to see innovation more in real time with new supply chain players. And I happen to have several of those in my portfolio, but Cloudleaf being the best example. But I think it will be a challenge, to answer your question, for the foreseeable future in this calendar year.
Let's talk about your portfolio, because you have been investing. You're joining the board of Quantum Metrics, and I'm curious what stuck with you there in terms of where you believe the future of technology is going.
Well, you asked the question the right way as always, Emily, and it's great to be on your show again. I miss talking with you. When I pick a company, I look for a company that has a business model change enabled by new technology. Digitization, every company in the world is going to go digital, and everyone is going to use the Internet of Things capability digitization to interface to their employees and their customers differently. As companies do that, they do not have a good feel for, are the digitization efforts being effective? Are their customers satisfied with the capabilities they just provided to them? What Quantum Metrics does so well is they show customers how to use digitization in a way that gets their desired outcomes. You talk about an example with COVID and the vaccine shots. And I just got my second shot yesterday. First time I've ever liked being called a senior in my life, and I'll lose that vocabulary in a moment. But in the line, the session, I was watching the various seniors go through, and most of them had trouble using their phone effectively to pre-register, et cetera. In fact, about half of them, when I asked them, said, my kids did it for me in terms of their interface. As a company who cares about your brand, if they were coming into a retail store and they were struggling with trying to find something in the store that would cause them not to come back, the retailer would have a real problem. In the digital world, we often don't know that people are having trouble entering an order online, trying to get information. And what Quantum Metrics does so well is they show you what is working or not working in this new world. They're a unicorn. First one in 2021. They were the first one this year also to do it on Series B investment, which means watch them for the future. They're going to be a hot stock in the future. And only about 12 to 15 companies per year achieve a unicorn status on a Series B investment round. They got $200 million. Super CEO and Mario, an amazing company.
So let's talk about stocks then, John, because I can't wait to hear your take on what's going on in the public markets. Are we seeing what you believe is the beginning of a longer-term correction in tech, or is this just a blip and tech markets are going to keep going up before the end of the year?
Well, it's important to know, Emily, some of the things you asked me, I am an expert on the internet, security, things of that type. On the stock markets, I've seen 5 major economic changes, upturns and downturns. You remember last year in February, I got called a pessimist for the first time in my life on one of your peer networks when I said we're headed for a real problem, and this is beyond just a issue with a potential pandemic. Unfortunately, turned out to be pretty accurate, and I said it would last 3 to 5 quarters. That looks like economically what it's going to be. Most likely scenario that I hear from top banks and from top investment players in the industry and my VC counterparts, The second half this year is going to be strong economically, probably well in excess of 6% in the US. US will come out first, but you'll see Asia follow, Europe follow. The M2 money supply last year was up 25%. This year, it's already up 12%. The best I've ever seen government respond both with fiscal stimulus and the central bank's actions. There's a lot of money out there, and with the COVID relief bill coming in, I think you're going to see a good economy the next 6 months plus. To answer your question on the stocks, as long as the interest rates don't come up too much, I think you're going to see the stocks do fine over this year. And I think it is entirely under government's control not to overspend too much and cause a problem here. But if I were betting, I clearly am. I'm betting big time on the year.
So you say you're not an expert, but you certainly had a lot to say there, and I'm sure a lot of people value that opinion. So thanks, John, for sharing that with us. Always great to have you here on the show. We'll have to have you back when we have a little more time. John Chambers, CEO of JC2 Ventures, former CEO of Cisco. Okay, still ahead, the EV startup Rivian races to get out ahead of trucks from rivals like GM and Tesla, seeking 3 vehicle debuts in a row. We'll have all the details next. Plus, Roblox pricing at $45 a share ahead of its public debut. Catch my conversation with Roblox CEO Wednesday, 10:30 a.m. in New York. This is Bloomberg. Rivian, the electric truck startup backed by Amazon, is running the automotive equivalent of a 3-ring circus, attempting to launch a trio of new vehicles in a factory that made its last car 6 years ago. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow with us now for more. Ed, what can you tell us?
Yeah, so what's intriguing here is that according to sources, Rivian hopes to build 40,000 units within its first 12 months, and that what they've done in building out that former Mitsubishi factory is install capacity for 300,000 units. And what's astonishing is it's not just one car that they want to launch in 2021, it's 3, a battery electric pickup in June, an SUV in August, and then the Amazon delivery van in November. And there's a lot of excitement around the company, right? Because they are on paper going to deliver this battery electric pickup before Tesla's Cybertruck, before GM's Hummer. But if you think back to Tesla and when it launched the Model 3 in 2017, it only delivered around 1,500 units by the end of that year. And then the rest is history, right? Elon Musk has talked repeatedly about the production hell that it went through in 2018. So that's really what the story was here, this ambitious plan for Rivian, and in the sense that they're not just going to the launch, they're actually going beyond that and hoping to get a lot of models out there in the real world in a very short space of time.
So talk to us about why Rivian is such an anticipated name in electric cars. I mean, you know, Bill Gates points out in his new book that there's an electric car for every car maker that goes with every letter of the alphabet.
Yeah, I think for one thing is that for all these newcomers, there's a lot around the SPAC-driven frenzy with EV companies coming to public markets, but not many of them actually have a real product yet. On paper, Rivian will be the next to bring a car to American roads where you can actually buy it, you can get behind the wheel. They've raised a ton of money, more than $8 billion from some big name investors, including Amazon and Ford. What was really interesting in reporting out the story is that we learned, according to sources, that Amazon had actually helped them during COVID by getting them PPE supplies, for example, getting them supplies to deal with COVID, get the factory back up and running. They're getting help from a subsidiary of Ford, who is also an investor, to get their metal stamps up and running as well. So there's a lot of excitement because they're actually going on paper to do it. For one thing, get a car into real world, but also because that vehicle, a battery electric pickup, a battery electric SUV in August, is more in line with what Americans like to drive. Most new vehicles bought today are in the light truck category, a bigger car. But if you look at what's out there that you can actually go and drive and buy today, it's the smaller vehicles like the sedans that Tesla makes, and that's part of the excitement too.
So quick, Ed, what's next?
Well, they've actually got to pull it off. You know, sources are telling us that they're insulated from the semiconductor shortage. They're currently running pre-production prototypes at high volume through a super futuristic high-tech pilot line, not even the main assembly line, but a special line they've set up to test that everything's actually working. And then they go through the assembly line starting in June. On paper, they're going to do it. And I'm hearing from sources they're taking an ultra-cautious approach. They have a lot of former Tesla engineers in senior positions who learned from that 2018 experience. And there's a lot of optimism that they're going to pull it off.
All right. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, thanks so much for joining us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We've got a lot of big interviews coming up. Next week is our Bloomberg Equality Summit. Starting March 16th, we will have conversations about race, gender, diversity. I will be speaking to Melinda Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as part of that event. And also to finish off the day, just want to point out tech giants roaring back in a big NASDAQ bounce. Meme stocks like GameStop, all the rage. You see GameStop, BlackBerry, AMC, all there. We'll be watching them tomorrow. I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.